Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Grant Smith Ellis. It is just past 7:45 p.m. on Friday, October 24th, 2025. And if you've been following the saga of the Karen Reed and John O'Keefe case, if you've been following the saga of former Trooper Michael Proctor, of former Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, of the release of Lindsey Gattani's phone extraction, ladies and gentlemen, then what you will know is that the revelations that have just come out at a very late time on this Friday afternoon related to the contents of former Trooper Proctor's phone are nothing short of disturbing. Yes, it can be revealed, although I have censored out some of the more disturbing details, that newly disclosed text chain evidence on Michael Proctor's cell phone contains images of intimate body parts, screenshots of Facebook posts. These were personal messages on Proctor's phone numbers and personal emails, and names of a blank redacted victim. Ladies and gentlemen, this confirms what has been speculated about for so long, which is the Massachusetts State Police Unit detailed to the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office had something very, very, very serious to hide. Now, if you are wondering where this information came about, it was in the context of another series of criminal cases, in particular the Miles King case out of Norfolk Superior Court. Now, that case and a number of other cases investigated by this state police unit run by Brian Tully, but also involving a number of other players, including Yuri Buchanan, John Fanning, Michael Proctor, and others. I think we're going to come to find out, ladies and gentlemen, much like the Annie Dukem drug lab scandal involving contaminated test results in a number of criminal cases, it's possible that this unit of the state police, in a number of ways, impacted cases over a number of years. Now, as I mentioned, this disclosure came about in the context of the Miles King case, where it was revealed today that the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office filed a motion, ladies and gentlemen, in order to have Michael Proctor's cell phone extraction subject to a protective order. Now, you can see right here, this is the protective order, and you can see it scrolling by on your screen. The Commonwealth does not even want, ladies and gentlemen, defendants to be able to retain this material in the criminal process. The Norfolk County DA only wants lawyers for the defendants to be able to have it, and then the Norfolk DA wants those lawyers to be able to show it only to the defendants. Why? Well, I think we know why. Because of the disturbing content of what this trooper of the state police was disclosing. Now, if you've been following the Karen Reed case, you'll know that former trooper Michael Proctor said some abhorrent things about Karen Reed. He said that you used vulgar, misogynistic language towards her. He joked about her nudes and looking for them in her phone. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say right now that I feel, and I'm probably not the only one, that I was tricked into defending Michael Proctor for that behavior. And I don't think Michael Proctor is the only one on that unit, that state police unit, to do bad things. I think it's very possible that Sandra Birchmore, a young woman who had been abused by at least one, maybe more, police officers who worked in Stoughton, Massachusetts, the very police department that sent at least 2 troopers, Yuri Buchanan and John Fanning, to the Massachusetts State Police. Sandra Birchmore's life was taken. She was unalived by Matthew Farwell, who now sits in federal prison, awaiting his October 26th trial date. But ladies and gentlemen, let me make very clear to you, that the Sandra Birchmore and the way her life was taken was initially declared the result of self-harm by Brian Tully's state police unit, John Fanning in particular. We know, according to the federal charging documents, that may have been a cover-up. And ladies and gentlemen, to complete the trifecta, we now have the juxtaposition, not only of what Michael Proctor and his friends or unit, whoever he was talking to, was doing over the past 12 years. We also have the Norfolk District Attorney's Office attempting to argue that Proctor's communication should be subject to a protective order. But that woman right above me, Lindsey, when her phone extraction was released by Brian Tully, it took months for any action, for any protective order to be issued. 15 years of Lindsey's life released unredacted, the only messages Tully removed. Lindsey was a witness in an active criminal case involving a blogger named Aiden Turtleboy Kearney. The only things Tully removed before turning over that extraction to Kearney's lawyer on April 24, 2024 were text from messages from Tully to Lindsey and from Tully's private investigator, Kate Peter, to Lindsey. There was no fight to protect Lindsey's dignity, to give Lindsey the white glove treatment. No, ladies and gentlemen, but Michael Proctor gets the white glove treatment, and at the same time, the devastating revelations come forward as to what Proctor was talking about. This news is breaking now within the past hour or so, but it will continue to spiral. We do not even know what the contents of these messages are. Okay, what was released by the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office in this memo, in this motion today at 4, right before the close of court on Friday, when news that is very bad gets released, was the best they could make it look, and it's horrible. How many cases were compromised? How much damage was done? And to bring this all together, let's listen to a video overview of what was done to Lindsey, who you can follow on social media at Lindsey. Lindsey, ladies and gentlemen, her cell phone extraction leaked by Brian Tully, the state police officer, part of this unit. And is this pattern demonstrated on Michael Proctor's phone that we may find out more and more and more and more about over the coming months and years? Is this pattern what resulted in what you're about to learn happening to a vulnerable, honorable, single mother of 4 who has fought through so much in life, only to, back in 2023, put her trust in the hands of a state police unit that we now know was rotten to its very core? And may Lindsey voice, and may the voice of people like Ida on social media and others who were harmed and silenced and suppressed and forsaken at the hands of this state police unit, may their voices ring loud and true and take center stage. The dream deferred no longer. Their agony and pain, authentic and brutal though it may be, will be the source of the justice that so many invoke, but so few understand. And if your quest for the same does not come from that place, then you will never know what it is to seek true reform and to seek true accountability for those who have done the most wrong. And that is why Lindsey story will take us home on this video, as she will use this AI overview to explain what she went through at the hands of the most devious, abusive, subversive state police unit and group of PIs that has ever existed. Bar none. Not just in the Commonwealth, but perhaps in the United States of America. And we'll read it right here. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Tully, says Lindsey, ordered Ken Mello to intentionally release 15 unredacted years of my phone extraction as a witness. Ted Daniels is the bravest reporter in Massachusetts. Say the names of the corrupt. Brian Tully, John Fanning, Michael Morrissey, Kate Peter. Ladies and gentlemen, And now let's watch this video. Let us center the voices of the unheard.
To the ground in shock. I just remember dropping to the ground in shock and horror. Those are the words of Lindsey Gattani. Imagine this. You agree to help the justice system, and you're told again and again that your privacy will be protected. Then you watch in real time as your entire private life is broadcast online. It is an absolute nightmare. And for this one witness, it became a reality.
So that's the central question here, isn't it? How could a failure this catastrophic even happen? How does a witness's entire life get handed over to the very man she was testifying against? We're going to break down the timeline, step by step, and look at the accounts of everyone involved. All right, let's start at the beginning. This whole story didn't begin with a threat or a demand. It actually began with a promise made to Lindsey Gattani by the same people who were asking for her help. At first, it was all about choice. The special prosecutor, Ken Mello, he reached out to Lindsey and assured her that her cooperation was completely voluntary. You know, the pitch was simple. Just have a conversation with investigators, and if you don't feel comfortable, you can walk away. No strings attached. Well, that promise of choice, it evaporated pretty quickly. What started as a simple request for some specific text messages suddenly became a demand for her entire phone. And when Lindsey decided against it, remembering she was told she could back out, she was hit with a subpoena. Just like that, the voluntary witness was now a legally compelled one. So with that subpoena in hand, the next step was getting the data off her phone. And this is where a whole new set of promises were made, really specific technical assurances that were all designed to protect her privacy. Picture it. She's in the district attorney's office. In the room are Lindsey, her victim advocate, Prosecutor Mello, and Detective Tully. They sit her down and explain exactly how they're going to safeguard all the incredibly sensitive information on her phone. And the main safeguard they offered her was this thing called a reverse taint team. They explained it as this independent group that acts like a filter. They would meticulously go through everything, separate the relevant evidence from her private life, and make sure nothing personal would ever be seen by the prosecution or the defense. On top of that, they added another layer of protection. They assured her that before any data was turned over, a judge would personally have to review and approve it in a formal court hearing. So, between the taint team and a judge, the process sounded absolutely ironclad. And let's be clear, the stakes could not have been higher. We are talking about 15 years of a person's life stored on a single device. Social security numbers, bank records, her children's birth certificates, private photos, privileged communications with her lawyers and her priest. It was, essentially, the digital blueprint of her entire existence. With all those assurances in place, Lindsey handed her phone over. Months went by, and then the absolute unthinkable happened. Every single promise that was made to her was broken in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. She found out that the defendant in the case, Aiden Carney, was live on his YouTube show, reading her private information out loud to the world. He had everything. Her entire unredacted private life had become public entertainment. The scale of this leak is just staggering. It was approximately 7,000 pages of her most private, unredacted, personal data. Every promised safeguard, the filter, the taint team, the judge's review, had all been completely ignored. In a panic, Prosecutor Mello fired off an email citing a clawback provision, which is a legal way to take back documents sent by mistake, and demanded the data be destroyed. The response from the defense attorney was blunt. It's your own fault that you sent it. They refused, and the defendant then spread it even more widely. The institutional response felt just as dismissive. A new special prosecutor, Attorney Cosgrove, was put on the case, and his assessment of what happened to Lindsey? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. The damage was done, and it felt like the system was just shrugging its shoulders. So how did this happen? Well, this is where the official story starts to get really murky. Officials began giving completely conflicting accounts about whether this whole thing was an accident or if it was an intentional choice. At first, the leak was framed as a terrible accident or an error, but in a recorded court hearing, Special Prosecutor Mello admitted the exact opposite. He stated, quote, "It was our decision to give him everything we had," saying they didn't want to be accused of withholding anything. So, not an accident, a choice. And the conflicting stories just kept coming. Detective Tully, the same man who promised her data would be protected, allegedly told her in a phone call after the leak, Lindsey, I told you, Aiden was going to get everything from your phone. A complete reversal of his initial assurances. And as if a 7,000-page leak of unredacted data wasn't bad enough, a new, even more serious allegation emerged. The data hadn't just been released, it may have actually been altered first. Suddenly, the defendant himself started claiming that key pieces of communication were suspiciously missing from the data he received, and this raised the explosive question of evidence tampering. So what was supposedly missing? Well, according to the claims, all the text messages between Lindsey and Detective Tully himself had vanished, gone. And while Lindsey's texts to another person, Kate Peter, were still there, all of Kate Peter's responses back to her after mid-December were also gone. It really suggests someone may have manually removed specific communications before handing everything else over. The fallout from this leak was, as you can imagine, significant. As professional consequences started to surface, the witness, Lindsey, was forced to take on a brand new role she never asked for, fighting for her own accountability. In the aftermath, Special Prosecutor Ken Mello was removed from the case. So was his replacement, Attorney Cosgrove. And Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, the officer who made those initial promises, he was demoted. The very system she had tried to help had failed her at every single turn. In her own words, I realized that I was going to have to advocate for myself and my kids by myself through the courts directly, that no one was going to help me. And that leaves us with this final critical question. This whole story highlights a profound vulnerability for witnesses in our digital age. When the legal safeguards that are supposed to protect people just crumble into dust, it raises a fundamental challenge to the very idea of justice itself.
Very well put together by Lindsey, ladies and gentlemen, and if that doesn't say it all, I don't know what will. My name is Grant Smith Ellis, and let me just tell you now, Lindsey Gatani's story is reflected in the disclosures we have seen tonight related to Michael Proctor, the disturbing disclosures that have been revealed, and I'm sure there is a lot more to come. And if you're just learning about this story, I think it's hard to not at least identify in some regard with the complaints of the Free Karen Read movement, of the Turtle Boy supporters. Regardless as to what one may think about the merits of those various cases, there was an unchecked form of power, realpolitik at its most unapologetic, running rampant through Norfolk County, centralized, localized, like the Aurora Borealis in Principal Skinner's kitchen, in Brian Tully's unit of the state police and its proximity to the Norfolk County District Attorney's Michael Morrissey, with Kate Peter, the private eye, tied in for good or bad measure. My name is Grant Smith Ellis. It's been a wild night, and that's your update. Until tomorrow, I'm a towel. See you later.